Hello, and welcome to Coaches on Couches, episode 14, The Mind, Fear, and Motivation. This is July 17th, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is John Min. I'm the USECA video chairman and the owner and head coach of MAGMA Gymnastics in New Jersey. My co-host is Pat Goldsmith, coach of Niagara Gymnastics. Today we have an incredible panelist. We have Dr. Ali Arnold. We have Dr. Alan Goldberg. We have Ken Miller, and we have Lisa Mitzel. Please remember the online protocol. Turn off your sound and your video. Only the host and the panelists will speak live. Please stay on topic. If you have any questions, send it via chat to John Min or Pat Goldsmith. Episode will be videotaped and posted on YouTube. So follow John Min USECA MAGMA on YouTube. Next week, we have another wonderful panel. Coaches on Couches 15, July 24th, will be Excel Excellence. Everything and what you want to know about Excel Gymnastics. We have Jane Caruso, the Region 7 chair, Dallas Gust, an Excel coach from Texas, Jen Skorsky, a New Jersey Excel coach and the Excel chairman for New Jersey, and Elaine Wolf, the Region 8 chairman for Excel. Once again, thank you so much for joining us on Coaches on Couches. So let's introduce our esteemed guests. Let's first start with Dr. Alan Goldberg. Please introduce yourself.
I'm a sports performance consultant. Been working with athletes across every sport for probably since the Pleistocene era, when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. And my specialty is working with athletes who have specific performance fears and blocks. And I do a lot of work in gymnastics around overcoming fear and blocking and things like that.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Ken Miller.
Hi, I'm Ken Miller. I don't know where to begin. I was a gymnast in college, and then I had the opportunity to coach at Duke University. I've coached at Rutgers, at Temple. I've worked at parquets for 39 years and had the great joy of traveling around and stealing every good idea at every gym I've ever been at, especially from the kids. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Next, we have Lisa Mitzel.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Mitzel, and I was a club gymnast all the way up to elite, and then a college gymnast at the University of Utah when we won 4 national championships under Greg Marsden. And I think one of the things that I just feel really lucky about, and especially to be here with all these esteemed professionals, is to have this wonderful exposure and guidance through all the mental training and the sports psychology methods. I also then went on to coach club gymnastics at various clubs. And then I was a coach at Stanford University, where I was the first coach to bring the team into the top 10 in the country. So I think one of the things that I love working with, I'm a mental training coach now, and I'm an author of 2 books, Focused and on Fire and Focused and Inspired. So the positive psychology is one of the things that is my strength. I also help athletes through the fear and the mental blocks, but it really is about self-esteem and emotional intelligence. And I think that's one of the things that we can do more of, especially in this era of gymnastics.
Thank you so much. And next we have, better known as Doc Ali, Dr. Allison Arnold.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Allison Arnold. People call me Doc Ali, and I spent most of my life as a gymnast. I was a level 10 gymnast and also got a college scholarship to do gymnastics. And now I'm a mental toughness coach working with all kinds of athletes, but mostly gymnasts. I think what I'm most passionate about is helping people, coaches, kids, parents, believe in themselves, give their gift, and really seeing that sports lessons are really all about life. And I've traveled all over the world to kind of seek out knowledge on those topics and just love helping people be the best they can be.
Thank you so much. So that is our wonderful esteemed panelists. So we're going to just jump right into it and kind of address the big white elephant in the room, coronavirus. Unfortunately, because of it, it has actually created a lot of fear among not just the gymnasts, but owners, coaches. You know, gymnasts are not just only concerned about their health and their well-being, but whether or not their gyms will actually even be there. Sadly, many gyms have closed across the country, even the one that I acquired. So how do we deal with that kind of fear? That anxiety that children have, that, oh, is my gym going to be there? Am I going to be trained for the season? Is my coaches going to be there? Are they going to get sick? Are they going to pass away? So how do we deal with that major issue? And I know that's a big non-specific topic, but let's start with Dr. Goldberg. Alan.
Well, one of the things I talk a lot about when I'm working with kids getting ready to compete is the concept of the uncontrollables. There's a lot of things in our sport and across all sports that we have no direct control over. And back when the world was normal, these would be things like the judges and the outcome, the place we get, how we end up doing, whether we make mistakes. But the problem, and what happens is when we focus on things we can't control, we get anxious, we tighten up physically, we get flooded with negative thinking and lose our confidence, and then end up falling apart performance-wise. But the problem right now is we're all swimming in this sea of uncertainty, and we're just faced with this massive uncontrollable. And when we're focusing on and the main uncontrollable is what's going to happen, the future. And I think under these circumstances, we have to sort of micromanage our focus and keep our concentration on what we can control today. And when we go to the gym and we practice, what do we have control over? Not much, but how we do right now, how we get our skills back, how we get our conditioning back. And what that calls for is an awareness when our focus leaves what we're doing now, the present, and goes into the future, because this is what generates anxiety, at least on a surface level, focusing on the future. And we need to bring our focus back to what's going on right in this moment. And we might have to do that over and over again over the course of a practice or over the course of a day. But that's really, it's an issue all the athletes I'm working with right now are facing. And it's tough. It's really, our lives right now are very uncertain and anxiety provoking.
Thank you. I'd like to address the same question to Doc Alley.
Yeah, when you brought up the question, John, that was right what was on my mind, controlling the controllables. And I think also looking at adversity and how adversity can be our greatest teacher. And I think with a lot of the athletes that I'm working with, we're definitely focusing on what's in your control, getting into the present, just what Dr. Goldberg talked about, but also looking at what are the gifts. We call them Corona Keepers. And Corona Keepers are what are the gifts from this situation, and how can this situation awaken us, or how can this situation make us bigger or better or stronger or more compassionate as people. So I really like to help my athletes and my coaches see, okay, what is the gift here that we can use as a Corona Keeper and keep us moving forward. And even after when Corona's done, we can keep these gifts and keep bringing them into our lives.
Thank you. Lisa, I'd like to address the same question, but then add a little addendum. What do you do when the fear is actually instilled by the parents? When the parents are constantly saying to the gymnast, oh, don't touch her. Make sure the coach has a mask on, or stay 6 feet away from everyone. And I've seen that happen. And the kids almost get to a point where they just don't want to go to the gym anymore. Lisa?
Well, that's an excellent question, John. I coached in a club a few years ago, and there were definitely, and this goes on probably in every gym where there's parents who are overly involved, and it's usually out of a place of insecurity or fear or living through their child. And we all know we can't, like you're saying, Dr. Goldberg is control what you can control. As a coach, we can't control what's going on at home. What we can do is we can provide open communication at the gym, and to be able to connect with the athletes in a very compassionate way, and to notice really by their body language, how they're interacting, what seems out of normal for them, if they're not as talkative. is then how to then connect with them as an individual and then address it with the team in a very general way that you're not pointing to any individual, but that you're saying, hey, we're all here together. We're all feeling somewhat vulnerable. And I want to reassure you that I'm doing everything we can. But if you have any questions, please come to me. This is where we want to support you. This is where we want to encourage you and build you up. And if you are feeling nervous, then this is a place that we can talk about it. And so to me, it's making it a very human kind of a dialogue where we care about each other as people. And it's not just about the gymnastics.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. Mr. Ken Miller, what is your viewpoints on this topic?
Ditto. Quick thoughts. One is, and I appreciate Liz saying this earlier, just listen to them. You know, you build rapport more by listening than anything else, not giving advice. Just listen, just be present with them. And maybe just ask a few questions. And that can be done because of your own personality, but it can be planned. You can actually orchestrate how to be a better person in rapport. The other things I thought about, and I like what Dr. Allen was saying is, well, what can you do? You can't. And so the silver lining in one way is you're home. How many videos have you watched on the history of gymnastics? Does anybody know who Mary Lou Retton is? Does anybody, find out who are these people on John. And also videos like, I worked with Dick and Linda Mulvihill, and they had a dormitory, and they had a videos box, and the kids who had nothing to do, which was pretty much when they're out of the gym, which was all day, the only videos were gymnastics. So they watched the ones over and over, and then they started to mimic the hand motions of Nadia Comaneci, where she did that little thing at the end of the routine. And it's rehearsal. They can also use this time to work on any specific issue they might have, like a flexibility in a certain joint or polishing their presentation. There's so much that we can, like, you ever say, I don't have time to work on that? Can't say that anymore. You got a lot of time. And efficiency, like you were saying, you only have, instead of 30 hours a week, you might have 12 hours a week. People are learning to become efficient in their training. That's awesome silver lining. So again, just point to the good things, and I'm taking notes on you guys. This is great stuff. Thank you.
Hey, John, if I could just add
Of course.
something. And
Please,
I think picking up what you talked about, Lisa, I think what's really important for coaches and when you're in the gym is for you to make sure your nervous system is settled as you're working with kids, because we're controlled by our mammalian biology. And when our parents are freaking out, that's going to jack our nervous system up into the red zone. When they come to the gym and the coaches are calm and reassuring and clear and develop these relationships, that's going to help the kids settle. And that's absolutely critical anyway, especially in this sport, which is has a high degree of danger. And it's very important that nervous systems are able to stay calm, because we communicate a lot without even using our words. It's sort of like the classic example of that is the coach who goes to a meet and is so excited that they're freaking out, and the kids are around them, and the kids naturally going to catch this. This is like contagious, and you don't want to be that activated when you're at a meet. But I think coaches can have a big impact in this area.
Thank you very much. Actually, Ken, you had mentioned about silver linings earlier. New Jersey has a 25% occupancy in effect. So we've told the parents they can't stay or watch. So I don't know if that counts. But okay, we're going to go now a little bit more, of course, into the specifics of the mind, the fear, and the motivation for gymnasts. I was with an athlete once when I was doing some guest coaching. And I use a very positive style. Unfortunately, when I was younger, I was a little bit more of the rough and the gruff. And she said to me, it's okay to yell at me. That's how I actually do stuff. You kind of have to force me to do it. Is it ever appropriate to yell or berate a gymnast or athlete or child to get them to do something? Or is that style pretty much archaic. Ali.
No,
It's a
no,
big one. It's a big one.
no. And I think, when athletes form like neural pathways, I agree with Dr. Allen that you really are, we're forming pathways with everything that happens. And we are, as coaches, we're forming the pathways of these athletes. And I think to have an athlete continue to have a pathway where, yelling's going to create anxiety, first of all, in that brain and in that neural pathway. But you don't want to program that and continue to feed that pathway. So I think there are lots of ways to create desire and create excitement and create enthusiasm without yelling or berating an athlete, for sure.
Thank you. I'd like Lisa to follow up, if you might.
Thanks. Allie, you hit it on the head. I mean, what I think that we are all learning, or at least reviewing at this time, especially after the documentary Athlete A, is how does this overpowering style of coaching affect these kids, and not just in terms of motivation, but in terms of the way their mind works. And so they're carrying around this constant guard of, I don't want to make my coach mad, and I don't want to be hurt, yet I'm not allowed to speak up. I'm afraid I'm not going to get chosen. All these different, it's very confusing when the yelling, the blaming, the intimidation, the quiet bullying almost, those types of things, you just have to recognize as a coach that is freezing them up, and it's actually depleting their confidence. It is not building their confidence. I have so many parents and coaches saying they're just not confident, and either they are or they aren't, right? And I'm like, no, you can build their confidence with self-efficacy and building their self-esteem by focusing on their strengths. And there's so many wonderful ways to do that. So the berating and the yelling and using that fear kind of component, there's already fear inherent in sports, okay? Each individual is going to experience that anyway. So you don't want to feed that into them, because then they're not actually learning who they are and identifying their own strengths, and how can they feel self-motivated instead of always relying on, like what you were talking about, John, is that somebody was saying, I need somebody to yell at me. I just smile and go, oh, well, I'm not going to yell. I'm going to tell you how fantastic you are. And then we're going to look at what your goal is and see how, and it really does kind of change in their mind, like, oh, they're not going to yell. And what do I do now? Because they've had this habit and they start to rely on it.
Thank you, Lisa. And I definitely think that instead of, like you said, yelling, setting goals for themselves, maybe setting reward systems for themselves, giving them motivational cues. Alan, how would you go about addressing a child if you met her and she said, I only can do stuff if you yell at me?
How would I address that?
Yes, sir.
Well, I have very strong feelings about what's considered to be old school coaching. Yelling, embarrassing, humiliating, being punitive, kicking kids out of the gym. From my experience, that kind of coaching behavior creates an atmosphere of fear in the gym, and it creates performance problems, and it sends an athlete's nervous system into freeze. Okay. Really good coaches coach through the relationship and create safety. And especially in this sport, this is a sport where the learning and the practicing and the competing are inherently dangerous. So the nervous systems are going to be activated anyway. And what we do is we will unknowingly memorize traumatic events. And if you have a coach who's yelling at you and humiliating you, that's going to stay in your system and it's going to shut you down. And it's, I would agree with your approach to that, Lisa. That's not how I coach. And it's sort of like good coaches create safe containers for their kids to learn, to excel, to fail, to make mistakes. And they're not punitive. And, it's okay to yell at a gymnast in the context of a safe, trusting relationship. Okay, but when I talk about yelling, I'm not talking about being demeaning, and I'm not talking about humiliating them. I mean, it's okay to raise your voice, you're frustrated, but if it's done in the context of a safe relationship, it does not send an athlete's nervous system into freeze. If there's no relationship, and that's all you know me for, as you know, if I don't do well, you're going to yell at me. That's a whole other can of worms, and that's one we need to close forever, because that's not what it takes to create champions in this sport or any sport.
Can I follow up on that?
Yes, please, Lisa.
Just a quick note, Dr. Allen, I thought that is just so important that you even mentioned that within the safe environment, a safe relationship, something that feels trusting on both ends, that the coach is trusting that the athlete, if they're not trying their hardest, that maybe they're struggling, okay, and that there's a reason. And the coach is trusting, the athlete is trusting the coach that when they start to feel or behave in a frustrated manner, that maybe they need to look at themselves and say, okay, what can I do, or how can I explain or communicate? The thing that I understand is that every athlete that I talk to, they're afraid to talk to the coach, especially if they're nervous, hurt, feel like they're behind, they're being compared, or they're comparing themselves. So this is one of the things that I hope we can talk about more and normalize, is how can we facilitate the kids being able to feel not just brave, but at ease with speaking up to the coach. Because when a coach gets frustrated, that's about them. That's about their frustration. That's not the kid. No matter what the kid does, the coach needs to own their own thoughts, their own feelings. Yeah. And so that's what I want to do, is normalize that. Okay, if I'm a coach, I'm feeling frustrated. Okay, guys, I'm feeling frustrated right now, and I've done this. So I'm going to go take, a 1-minute break for myself, and you guys can take a breath and collect yourself, and then we'll come back. And then they know I'm frustrated. They know I'm managing it. And then I come back. Sorry, I took a little bit long on that, but I think that's really.
Can I piggyback on that too?
Yeah. Of course, Allie.
Well, first of all, I think what you said, Lisa, is so important, because you're also modeling. I mean, you're modeling emotional control for your athletes, which is so important. But I have 2 things I wanted to add. Number one, that I do think that coaches, and I want coaches to hear this, that you can still be passionate.
Amen.
And you can still inspire. And there's a difference between like confronting and putting a kid down. But instead, you can be so passionate and so inspirational and lift them up with your belief. And I think coaches can really do that. But the other side of this is, I think a lot of times coaches coach the way that you're talking about, John, or Dr. Allen talked about, like old school, is because they don't know what else to do. And I think it's so important that we increase coach education through things like this. Thank you, John, and thank you, Pat. Where coaches can get more tools in their toolboxes. Mm-hmm. Tools that can be constructive, tools that can help, and tools that, so they don't go right to their habitual response, which might be losing it with a kid or getting more angry. When you feel in control, and when you have options, and when you have tools, you're going to be much more successful as a coach and much more able to navigate your own emotions. I think coach education is so important right now.
Amen. That's excellent. Like you said, if someone takes the wrong tool and tries to use it, they get mad at the tool rather than themselves. And you're right. Sometimes coaches do default to that. So that's very true. I have a question from Bryce. I'd like to. Yes, Ken.
Okay. I was just reading Bryce's question, and my comment was going to be on that topic, and then I saw the question.
Yes.
So real quickly, I worked with a young athlete, and I said, "What do you need from me?" So it was a college kid, so she was mature, kind of. And I said, "What do you need from me?" She said, "I need you to push me." I said, "Okay, explain." She goes, "I want you to push me, but I don't want you to treat me like a kid." I said, "Okay." Well, her normal coach was Melba Toast. He was so gentle and so sweet and so kind, but she was not used to that. She had the wherewithal to recognize what she responds to. I like that. She knows herself. She was able to request specifically. So I said, I can do that. I can have, my expectation is really high. The other thing is, and I love this conversation. If you have a rapport with a kid, you can tell. I had an athlete say to me, my family's going through a crisis. So I knew I needed to back off. We had the rapport where she could come to me and say, my family lost $8 million this week. I wanted to say it's nice to have $8 million to lose, but I kept my mouth shut. But, if you have a report where they can ask you, or they can tell you, I'm not feeling really good today, or I'm having my period, or whatever, just that cuts through. And yelling, I must say, I was raised, I'm a little bit older than some of you, but when you first said yelling, John, I didn't go to the screaming, berating thing in my head. I went to the cheerleading. You're better. Come on. What did you do last week? You know what you did, to keep them on that edge of performance of high expectations. But at the same time, I don't want us to be so quick to give them an out for not trying their very best. So to walk that fine line, anyway, that's all I have.
Well, no, definitely. There is a difference.
Do that in a relationship. Like if there's a solid relationship, you can walk that line. And a good coach consistently pushes kids out of their comfort zone. This is not about milquetoast. This is about you're selling. Good coaches sell hard work in the pursuit of excellence, and that means you want to help kids get out of their comfort zone. But you have to be smart about it as a coach. And if getting a kid out of their comfort zone puts them into freeze, then you need to back off. And the one point I wanted to add, and I'll try to do it really quickly, is it's really important for coaches to have a lens of how mammalian biology works, how the nervous system works when they're working with kids. Kids lose their skills and balk and freeze because they have gotten too activated. They're too afraid. This is not a conscious thing. They don't have a mental problem. They're not doing it on purpose. They're not doing it to get attention. They're doing it because they're feeling unsafe. And the foundation of that is past upsetting events, close calls, injuries, and falls. If a coach understands that when a kid is balking and they're not able to use their coaching, no matter what the coach tries, they're still not able to get the kid unstuck. If they understand this is because the kid is in freeze, and your job is to back down, move them to lead up skills, move them to, giving them a spot or whatever, then they will be less inclined for themselves to go into fight. Because when you're yelling and screaming at a kid and impatient, your nervous system is overactivated too. You're not in freeze, but you're in fight. And not good things happen when we get angry like that. We're not troubled by deep waves of thought when we get angry.
Right. John, real
Yes,
quick,
Ken.
the second part of Bryce's question was, what about when you're in a gym or everybody else?
Everyone else yells, exactly. Especially what if your owner
Right.
kind of leads that kind of toxic environment? What would you do, Ken?
So Matt McCann, good buddy, you know him. He said, when you go in the gym, you're a professional. You put all your anxiety, your problems, your issues, your relationships, your wife, everything, you hang it up on the coat and walk in there as a professional. It's not about me. It's not about me at all. Take nothing personally. Kids not performing, it's not about me. That helps me, like the others were talking about. My own anxiety is going to come through. And if I'm living a vicarious experience through my athlete's performance, I shouldn't be in the gym. And if I can't handle myself, then I need to give myself a timeout.
That's very good. Lisa, may you also follow up on that question? What do you do as a coach if the other coaches are all following that kind of procedure of negativity?
Well, I've been in that situation to a certain degree. I was at a gym where two of the top optional coaches were extremely, not just serious, but intimidating on a regular basis. And that doesn't mean that they never laughed or, had some light moments with the gymnasts. But it was so intense at times. I did not stay long. That comes down to a choice of I didn't feel great being in that environment. I felt like I was being judged at times, and I had way more experience than these coaches. So I think it's just a matter of your own values, your own ethics. Is it important for me to coach? Then can I find another place? But I think that you start to border on being complicit. If you're staying in a gym where there's yelling and berating and that those kids are in fear, then what is your real purpose as a human being? Is it to just follow and keep your job? Is it to try and just be the positive person in the bunch? I go a step further and I say, you know, I made a commitment for this long, and then I need to step aside because this is not where I feel it's safe. And then maybe even consider if it needs to go a step further and report.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to kind of follow up on that question and then move on to the topic of discipline. Obviously, you know, gymnastics is a very tight, strong, mental discipline sport. My background is actually from martial arts, so it's a very disciplined. But is it ever taken too much to an extreme? I've been to gyms where they actually have mandatory styles of haircut or apparel, or literally the athletes are not allowed to talk, and they must always address the coaches as sir or ma'am, or, you know, with the lineups and stuff. Does it ever get too far, or is that kind of discipline and control allowed and acceptable? Ali, if you don't mind leading us off.
Well, again, I kind of think there's a fine line. I mean, I like discipline. I think it's important to discipline your mind. I like it when gyms start with a lineup, but gymnastics is supposed to be about joy and about expression. And so I do think there's a line to where there is too much discipline. If a gymnast or a gym is requiring, again, like certain haircuts or having to do things a certain way for everyone, where the joy and the ability to be creative and express themselves as individuals is taken away, then I think that's probably crossed that line. So I think some discipline is good because we have a dangerous sport and we need to have discipline and control in the gym. But at the same time, I think we need to keep fun and freedom. And I think coaches will find that when there is that element of fun and freedom, the gymnasts are going to perform better anyway, because they're not going to go into the freeze response and be intimidated.
Thank you. Alan, do you mind following also up on that question?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Doc Alley. I think that this is supposed to be fun. And if it's not fun, it's serious. And performance problems happen when things get too serious. Yeah, you have to have rules because of the safety that's required. But I don't think you have to have that kind of discipline to get the most out of the kids that you're working with. You know, I just think that kind of seriousness is problematic, you know.
Thank you. To follow that up a little bit more, layers upon layers. In the old days, discipline would always be met with some form of punishment if it wasn't met. You know, in the old Marines and military, it would be like, drop and give me 50. You know, go climb 5 ropes. Are you looking at me? Are you talking back to me? Should we still instill some kind of conditioning or a form of punishment to control discipline, or are there other ways? Ken, do you mind leading us on that?
No.
All right. Good. What about you, Lisa? Anything additional?
I really like Ken a lot. Yeah, I know that I've been coaching many years, and when I came out of college and I was coaching in Southern California, I was the driver. In my personality, I'm extremely self-motivated. I love pumping motivation into my kids. But as a young coach, I was too hard at times. I was still very positive, but I did a little bit of that punishment thing. And it took me a few years to recognize that I felt tense. I felt uncomfortable. I wasn't having fun. And I recognized when somebody would cry that this was not, I was in a place when I was training elite and in a very high achieving environment, that I ended up feeling threatened or punished with conditioning. And that didn't make me want to come back. That didn't make me feel inspired. And so all of us are having our own personal evolution. But yeah, today, absolutely not. That's not going to help them appreciate the conditioning. It's not going to help them feel good about themselves because they're being punished. There's many reasons.
Yeah. Can I go with that too?
Yes, please, Alan.
I agree. You know, I think it's so important to activate the heart. And when you work with athletes and you bring them back to their goals, when you bring them back to their dreams, when you talk, you know, about more, I come from a clinical psychology background, so we talk a lot about logical and natural consequences. So I think if you talk to an athlete and you communicate and you really talk about what's going on with them and what their dreams are, and you try to activate their hearts that way, I'd rather, again, see them lifted up rather than punished, because that just makes them feel, again, put down.
Thank you so much. Now, the flip side of that coin, and I'm going to address this to Alan, is it ever appropriate for coaches to give the cold shoulder or to ignore or kind of send away? Like, oh, if you're not going to do it, it's okay. Just go over there and condition by yourself. You know, is that methodology ever effective, that reverse psychology we used to call it, that was so popular? Please?
Yeah, my feeling about that is no. I think, you know, you're working with kids, you're working with young, highly influential kids who are in the middle of development, and that's really, it's a hostile way to deal with kids, to shun them like that and to make them feel like if you're not going to follow what I want you to do, you're going to be banished to Siberia, so to speak. I will not deal with you unless, you know, you do exactly what I say. And I just think that does a lot of damage to kids. Again, it's sort of another one of these elements where you're coaching through fear. You're creating an unsafe container for the kids. And that just backfires. It drains someone's confidence. It gets them over-focused on the coach. And it distracts them from what they're doing. And it doesn't end well, is my feeling about that.
Yes, Sally.
And you're also, again, if we look at everything we do as like a metaphor for life, you're teaching a life lesson that if I'm struggling, if I'm not living up to someone else's expectations, that they abandon me. And that's a life lesson that gets encoded, again, in the brain that then can be repeated and repeated. And so I think, you know, kids are little love machines. They want you to be proud of them. They want to build that relationship. And so when a kid is struggling or an athlete's struggling, to be able to help them by actually coming together and communicating about it, that's the life lesson, because that's the lesson you want them to have in their romantic relationships in the future and their, you know, other other intimate relationships. So we want to look at what is the big picture life lesson that we are giving this athlete with our behavior as coaches.
Thank you so much. My co-host, Pat Goldsmith, now has a few questions he's going to address. Pat, take it.
All right. So the first question is, what are some things you think coaches can try to implement in their daily practice to increase athlete confidence and positivity? And we will start with Lisa.
Thank you, Pat. I think one of the most basic and simplest things that we can do as gymnastics coaches is, I think, Alan, you were saying about slowing down at home, slowing down in the gym for even 2 minutes and taking deep breaths with your athletes. When you get centered and calm together, they're then realizing that that's important, that the coach recognizes it, that then they're allowed to then have a moment of pause in between turns to get calm, that the mental and emotional side is really important. So I would even go further, but just to answer that quickly, that's one of the most basic things I would do and that I have done with my athletes. It makes all the difference.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. Doc Alley, what would you have to say about this?
I think coaches can build confidence in so many different ways. I think it's important that they acknowledge small successes and really don't just, you know, acknowledge the big, huge things, but keep encouraging the small successes and every step along the way. I think it's great when coaches praise character and do a lot of what I call you are statements, because when you say you are, like you are such a hard worker, that's translated to the athlete as an I am statement that becomes something part of their personality makeup. So finding those character traits that can really be acknowledged, like again, you're such a hard worker. I'm so impressed with how you overcame that today. Really looking at how coaches can build athletes by praising not only achievements, but character, I think is really important for coaches.
Thanks, Doc Alley. Kenny, do you want to touch on this?
I would like to recommend growth mindset. Maybe here's an answer going backwards in time, but if a club that had some difficulty with coaches' behavior, if they had a book club of the month, and if all the coaches were going to get, here's a book we're going to read as a group, and we're going to have this time, we're going to come in and share, and you will be accountable, have questions. You'll be like, this is part of your training. What is the growth mindset? And I'm sure, in fact, one of the questions I have here for each panelist is, before we leave this, and don't do this now, but sorry, John, what resources or books or YouTubes that you would recommend to Ken Miller? And I would guess it wouldn't be too hard to make a list to give to these coaches, but the growth mindset is really wonderful. The book Why is really wonderful. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I recommend you get it on audio, because you can listen to the actual voice and the tones and the passion of the speaker. And I'm also not that great of a reader. So anyway, I don't know if that answered your question, Pat.
Yes, I love listening to the audiobooks and podcasts in the car too, because it's like you can just digest it in little chunks. Like I'm on my way to work, it helps you get in the right mindset too. Alan, do you want to touch on this as well?
Yeah, sure, Pat. A couple of things. Coaches, if you want a positive attitude in the gym, you have to model it. I mean, it starts with you. Our behavior speaks so much louder than our words. And you want your kids to be positive, you have to have that attitude. You have to be passionate about what you're doing, and you have to treat kids with respect, and so that they feel cared about. And one of the things coaches need to get into doing is regularly catching their kids doing things right. And this is not, I think the argument against doing this is, let's build self-esteem. Let's make everyone feel good. Even when they screw up, let's just make them feel good. And so people think that catching kids doing things well is going to make them soft. This is a spin-off of that old school model. But I really think it's critical that, and I think, Doc Al, I think you're saying this too, we want to underline when kids do things well, whether it's gymnastics-wise or tenacity, things about their character, because that's what motivates kids. Your relationship where you make kids feel good about themselves, they'll run through walls for you. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's critical.
That's awesome. One of the things my mom has always said to me about coaching is catch them doing something right. And she's been coaching for longer than I've been living. So, so it was awesome hearing you say that. So the next question, which also touches on what Lisa said about showing the athletes that you are taking the mental side of things seriously. How much time should an athlete spend on mental strength training per week? And should athletes who are struggling with fears or confidence, should they be spending extra time? Let's start with Kenny.
Big question, very big question. I think I'm going to just yield to the people who are actually published in this area. I could give you my answer, but I'm sure theirs will be much better.
All right. Would anyone like to take this one?
I'll answer first. One of the things that I know that the kids in particular feel stressed about is following all the adults' advice and instructions. Is that they're trying to live up to everybody's expectations. And so what I do is I will give them a minimal amount of time, but then I also kind of will suggest a range. If you can start with this amount, because most gymnasts and most athletes do not do any kind of regular mental training. So if they can just start with just 5 minutes of deep breathing and doing some imagining of their routines or a skill, something to some quiet music, if they can do that just like 3 times a week, that's a start. Especially if the coaches are not leading something at the gym. I highly recommend that coaches do some sort of, whether it's once a week or more often, some sort of like 15 minutes at the end of practice, that they do some mental skills and coming together for the mental and emotional side. But I think you can increase up to like 20 minutes a day easily with mental training.
I'll go. I agree with what Lisa's saying in definitely a couple ways. I think definitely a half an hour a week doing some kind of mental training can be so effective in your gym. And the great thing is that that time saves you so much time later in terms of dealing with fear, dealing with frustration. It creates such a great team energy when you're teaching a mental skill and everyone's working on that. Let's say everyone's working on perseverance this week, or everyone's working on unity. You know, it really creates a great culture in your gym, which is so important, especially in today's gymnastics environment. So I think at least a half an hour a day. But I also think that you're going to integrate mental training, a half an hour a week, I'm sorry. I also think you're going to integrate mental training through your language all throughout your practice. So you start saying things like, what's your key word on that skill? Or you start saying things like, let's take a deep breath and get present before you do this bar routine. So you teach a concept that then is integrated throughout your whole system and culture. And what's great about that is your little kids grow up learning it too. So you can just teach more and more, and it becomes, again, integrated throughout your whole system.
If I could add to that, Doc Alley, that's, see,
Sorry.
you know, the complaint about mental training is we spend all this time in the gym. How can we take extra time to do mental training? And the trick is to figure out ways of integrating mental training into what you're normally doing. Like, for example, when kids, most gyms have kids warm up. They do, you know, little laps, then they do stretching. And what's critical when a kid goes to a meet is that they use their pre-performance routine to help them stay calm. And a pre-performance routine, I'm going to stretch a certain way, I'm going to do certain exercises. If I do it the right way at a meet, and I focus on what I'm doing while I'm doing it instead of my thoughts or the other kids and the judges, that's going to calm me down. And what can be integrated into practice is when you're doing your warm-up, you teach the kids how to concentrate. And what does that mean? In other words, you warm up with awareness. You give the kids maybe 5 minutes to warm up as they deconfect from school. Let's assume there is school, okay? And, you know, they can goof around, they can jog up and down and think about what happened in their day. But then you say, okay, now we're going to work on warming up. And for 5 minutes, you want to teach them to stay focused on what's going on in their body while they're doing it. And when they drift, to bring themselves back. So for example, if we're doing stretching, I want to stretch with awareness. As I'm stretching, I want my focus on the feeling in my body. Versus what a lot of kids do is while they're stretching, mentally they're out to lunch. They're somewhere else. But at a meet, that somewhere else would be freaking themselves out. So the challenge for coaches is to get creative about how to integrate relaxation, concentration training into what you normally do. And you don't have to spend a lot of time doing it. You're warming up, pick part of warm up to teach kids to be aware when they drift and to bring themselves back, to be aware when they leave the now and bring themselves back, to be aware when their focus goes to other kids and to bring themselves back to what they're doing.
Pat, can I get 20 seconds
Love
back?
it.
But my 20 seconds back?
Yeah.
I'm coaching like 6 to 8 year old. I'm mentoring young coaches, but I'm coaching little kids. And okay, let me just back. My perception is I don't coach kids. It's not a vertical relationship. It's you and I standing next to each other, side to side, looking at the sport, looking at the skill. And I'm your advocate. I'm your partner. It's not a dictatorial thing. And part of that is asking them, what are you going to think about? Are you moving with intention, or is it just accidental? Or what were you just thinking?
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Fagley is one of my favorite guys, and he actually told an athlete that when she vaulted, you need to fart faster.
You need
and she looked right at him, fart, pass gas. You have to fart faster. She looked right at him and said, "Okay, coach. Well, obviously there's no communication going on." I'm finding so much joy in handing over the responsibility of their training to them.
Oh, yeah.
and letting them, when you tell a 7-year-old that they're an athlete and their chest gets big and they stand broad, or when I saw a hyperactive, highly gifted, talented mutant athlete, fast twitch, who was ADHD. And before she jumped up on bars, she stood and stared at him and took a deep breath. And I said, "Stop, everybody, come here. Did you see what she just did?" And they all had, "Well, what do you mean?" "Do it again." She goes, "What did I do?" Do it. So I was using that opportunity to teach everybody to pause. And that's valuable. And when you praise somebody in public and you encourage it specifically, that behavior will be replicated. If not just by that kid, by everybody, because they're all going to want, "Did you see me breathing?" "Yeah, I did." "Did it help?" "Yeah, it did." That's my 20 cents.
I
That was
could add,
good.
I can add a note.
Please.
Go ahead, Lisa.
I love, like you, Ken, I love this conversation. I love all this input. Clearly, I'm honored to be in this group. I think one of the things that the kids enjoy about the sessions that I have is that I always include fun. And so for coaches out there, people that are listening or watching, it's so important that when you talk about mental training, that it's not work, but that it makes you feel good about yourself. It gives them a sense of feeling in control. I mean, two of the things that the gymnasts always tell me that they want is they want to feel more confident and in control. And so when they get in tune with their thoughts and their body and their breath, that gives them a sense of that being in the present moment, feeling in control, and feeling intelligent. They start to feel intelligent about themselves.
Yes.
And then you bring in the fun. And then like you said, Doc Allie, it's about their character. Woo, look at you. You are concentrating. Everybody, let's, watch or celebrate. You celebrate those little successes of concentration. Celebrate that they are focused on, their alignment, their shape. Those are the things that are going to make them feel like they have some talent, intelligence, they're valuable, they're contributing to the team, positive energy, all those things. So the mental training really needs to be fun.
All right. So next question is, we've all been in the situation where maybe an athlete was anxious because of, let's say, for instance, a poor warm-up at a meet. Okay, every coach has been there. Athlete does something crazy in the warm-up, not what they normally do. They're freaking out. What are some tips to begin to de-escalate that anxious athlete right away that coaches may not be aware of? Doc Allie, you start us off.
Well, I don't know about coaches not being aware of them, but just some tips are going to be, first of all, you want to de-escalate the anxious freeze state, as we've been talking about. So you want to have them focus on their breathing. I think that you want to bring the mind back to a place of trust and trusting themselves. So reminding them of past successes, reminding them that they can do it. And I think also sometimes you have to change their body language, almost get them out of that situation and do something physical to get them to make a change. Sometimes you might want to do something with humor, like you tell them a joke or totally disconnect the stuck neural pathway, or again, maybe have them shake it out. But I think to activate the breath, activate the brain and the self-talk to bring them back to a place of faith and trust, and then change up the body language sometimes is a great 3-step process to get them into trusting themselves and knowing that they're going to be okay.
Awesome. Thank you. Lisa?
Well, it depends on what is really going on. Each situation can be very different. Like Doc Allie said, is that you want to diffuse the emotion. And hopefully each coach that is experiencing an athlete with that kind of stress right there at a competition, that they have established that ability to do that together in practice. Because there's always going to be stressful times in practice, right? Whether they're getting ready for competition or learning a new skill, facing some kind of anxiety and fear. It's have a habit of doing that in practice so that feels familiar. Okay. And then you need to have the accessibility in your mind. So the athlete needs to have this, that with all the other mental training, hopefully they've been doing, is it feels very accessible to be able to focus and put the parents, the judges, everything out of their mind. So it's not about the meet. It's about themselves learning to compete well, learning to perform at a time that's stressful, and just feeling good about the challenge. This is a challenge. We can do this together. I'm here for you. Again, that they have done that in practice is also very important.
Thank you, Lisa. Alan, would you like to go next?
Yeah, you know, Doc Alley, one of the things there's something called a pattern interruption, where when you're interacting with a kid who is freaking out, you do something totally unexpected. You know, you talk about, you know, I'm having a problem at home and I'm trying to figure out, you know, if I should use this dog food for my dog or I should use that dog food. And it's been really keeping me up at night. And I really think you can help me because I know you have a dog. And so any kid who's freaking out and you're asking them about this, they're going to go like this. Huh? I mean, it disturbs that activation cycle that's happening. So, and humor is a great way of doing that. But also what you might need to do immediately is and maybe you mentioned this, Doc Ellie, is get the kid out of that immediate environment first. And then you try to settle them down. And one way of doing that, which is more organic to us as mammals, is to have the kid orient. And orienting is what animals do in the wild to know they're safe. They use all their senses, sight, smell, hearing, to connect with the external environment. I'm freaking out right now because I'm orienting to my thoughts. That's going to activate my nervous system until I go into freeze. And so you might even have take a kid outside and go, okay, I want you to pick, I want you to let your eyes find something that, and describe it to me. Let your eyes decide what's interesting and describe it in detail, not whether you like it or you don't like it, but everything about it. And then you have them do it a second time and then a third time, and that will settle them down. And then there's also the point of, have you ever had the experience of really screwing up your warm-up and falling on everything and then sticking your routine in the meet? And most kids have. And I mean, but you wouldn't bring that out unless you got them settled first. You know. Anyway, those are my thoughts about that. Did I have another thought? No, that's about it.
Thank you, Alan. Kenny?
So Sandy was about to go up on the beam at a national event, and it was up to her whether she was going to win the meet or not for her team. And the coach pulls her aside and said, "Hey, Sandy, where's the bar cables?" She just looked at him and said, "What are you talking about? Where's the bar cables? Where's the mirrors?" And she goes, I got to compete. What are you talking about? In our gym at home, where are the bar cables? She goes, "Well, if that was the bars and in our gym, then the bar cables, well, then where's the mirror?" Well, in our gym, and Sandy took a deep breath, smiled, and she was home.
That's a pattern interruption.
Yes.
That's beautiful. That's
Well,
beautiful.
and it's an anchor. It's also an anchor to being at home and being where she feels great. So you're also anchoring that mental state, which is awesome.
Yep. Good stuff.
That's awesome.
All right, excellent. You don't mind if I take over, Pat?
Go right ahead, John.
Thank you. All right, so the next question is, do we allow pre-rituals? How many times have we seen the gymnasts on the beam right before their series? They're kind of rubbing their hands together. They might actually, kind of like blow onto them. I actually had one gymnast, no joke. Every time she had to go for one of her big floor passes, she would actually make the sign of the cross before she would go. Do we allow it? Is it something kind of minor, or does it have something more deep, or deeper intentions? Let's go with Dr. Ali first.
Well, as long as it can be integrated into the routine and it looks like it's integrated in the routine, I don't see any harm in it. Because again, I really look at always about neural pathways in the brain. And so if it's something like she likes to do or he likes to do a certain move or a pose that can be integrated, I think that's fine. If it's something that looks really weird, that is going to be a deduction, then I would rather not train that, but create something internal that can still be that anchor that's kind of in their control and not really a funky external thing, but more of an internal thing.
Got it. Alan, following that up a little bit more too, what about the athletes who do something like literally like bite their nails? I had one athlete actually pull their hair out before they had to compete. So how do we address those types of situations, or is that when we need to tell the parents to get psychiatric help?
Well, that's not a pre-performance routine I would encourage, because after a while you're going to run out of nails and hair. Let me though speak to I'll get back to that. I want to just speak briefly to the pre-performance routines when they can be integrated in are very important. They serve two purposes for athletes. First of all, they're familiar, and anything familiar binds anxiety. If I do this all the time before I do my routine, I stretch a certain way, that's going to help me calm down. And it's not about superstition. A lot of people think they do these things because once they did it, they stuck their routine and they did great. It's more about, it's familiar. But the other important purpose of a pre-performance routine is it helps the athlete distract themselves from their thinking and the internal distractions. Because if I have a certain routine before I go up and I do it the right way, and the right way being I focus on what I'm doing mentally while I'm doing it physically. This is why I mentioned that whole warm-up routine in the gym. If I'm stretching as part of my routine before I get up and I'm focusing on my arm, that's going to, and I'm the feeling in my arm and maybe breathing into it, that's going to take my focus away from the negative thinking and what if this happens and what if that happens. So I think, when they can be integrated and they're not bizarre, they're very, very important. And then the nervous stuff, that's not about the routine. That's more about getting their pre-performance nerves under control and giving them other things to focus on instead of whatever's going on that's generating those nervous habits.
Thank you so much. Lisa, do you mind addressing those situations?
Yes, worked with this a lot. And I myself, as a 15-year-old gymnast training for elite, I had a crash in the gym and lost like 70% of my skills. So I was very much into the fear and having to relearn, working with Dr. Ken Ravizza. So I understand so intimately that fear is if you're not doing some kind of ritual or pre-routine, pre-skill routine, that then it feels out of control. It feels scary. And so depending on what level they are and where they are at mentally and emotionally, are they ready to be open to changing that a little bit, just a little bit? And do they like the look of, if it's a compulsory kid, of somebody who scores well, who performs well? Do they like, is it their desire to also perform in a rhythm that they can do it better, okay, without their typical stop, wipe my hands or whatever they're doing? But I also gradually introduce with their kind of like that we work together, kind of like an autonomy type relationship, is what feels right to you. Are you going to breathe when your hands are up? Are you going to step right foot, left foot? If you are looking back at the beam right now, do you think we can bring that down to just 2 times instead of 4 times? So it's kind of a natural learning process because I think they want to do better. All of them want to do better. It's a matter of really working with them in a way that feels comfortable. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go to one more brief question before we close everything up for a final summary. I'm going to go to Doc Alley. Now that we live in this social media age, children and gymnasts have access to so much video. One of the biggest things is the fail videos, seeing people like do skills and fall. And lots of times they're laughing or it's funny. Do you find that's a healthy thing for gymnasts to watch or train that, or do you feel that it can set up psychological blocks or doubts?
Personally, again, I look at the brain in terms of neuroplasticity. very much that's kind of my framework. And so I'm always looking at how you're building a network in your brain. So I don't encourage my athletes to watch a lot of fail videos. I feel like it does build that pathway, and I think it's unnecessary. I like them to watch a lot of success videos though, and I like them to do the skills with the athletes. So I actually discourage watching a lot of fail videos because I feel like it just builds that pathway into their brain, and I'd rather build a success pathway.
Thank you. Ken, real quickly, following up on that, have you ever had to deal with an athlete who watched another athlete get hurt on something else, and then that athlete gets a fear of that skill, even though they're not doing it directly?
Well, that's the upside of the corona, this silver lining, that we all have masks on. They can't see what everybody else is doing because the mask is up covering their eyes. It was a really bad joke. Really bad joke. It's going to happen. And I think I would assume that most of the kids in the gym know that somebody's going to wipe out and fall. There's such a thing as a kid falling, and you go, that was a really good wipeout. So you try to make it as benign as you can. My mind's fixated on one story, if you'll indulge me. Judy came to her coach and said, I figured out what's wrong with my side aerial and beam. Really? Yes, if I turn my thumbs out towards my knees, it helps me land it perfect. And the wise coach said, I never thought of that. Wow. Can you show me how that works? The point is, if it's not broken, don't fix it. If it works for the kid, everybody's individual. You know, if anybody told Pistol Pete Maravich that he can't wear a certain pair of socks that he wore every competition during his 100-point games, we probably wouldn't have Pistol Pete Maravich anymore. These little idiosyncrasies, if it doesn't hurt them, let them have it. That's just my idea. And if people fall and they wipe out, yeah, they got hurt. It happens. Just let's move on. Okay, here we go.
Thank you so much, Ken. So once again, I wish to thank all of our panelists. We are unfortunately out of time. I'll be honest, I would love to invite all of you back to follow up and do like a second part. I honestly believe that every coach in the country, probably the world, should listen to you guys. You know, listen to your advice, listen to your mental focus, because we do have so many coaches who don't have any kind of background in sports psychology or child psychology, or, you know, just reading those books. And then we ask them to go with little children, teaching them such complex skills and do a great job. It's not as easy as you think. You know, I've evolved as a coach too, and I've learned so much from people like yourselves and all the others. So we are going to go into our final summary. So if you can just say in a few words to coaches out there, how to deal with their athletes, with their motivation, with their mind, with their fear. What would your final words and summary be to them? Let's start with Lisa.
Thank you, John. Well, afterwards, I'd like to be connected with everybody, so I hope we get to share emails and whatnot. You know, the most important thing that I find with every athlete, and especially every team, is that they really do learn how to feel calm and in control. And as coaches, we can be proactive. As coaches, we can introduce and practice these things with them. I would say, you know, get some sports psych books. My books are very friendly for the kids and also the coaches, but I would say be proactive. And when you do that, you're setting a tone for learning. You're setting a tone for the fact that you're still learning, and you're setting a tone for connecting with them in a way that is different from just push, go faster, jump higher, not good enough, we got to get ready for the meets. But this is a human connection. And that human connection is something that is going to develop their self-esteem and how they are as a person in their adult life.
Thank you so much. Ken, would you mind giving us your final pearls of wisdom?
Build a house of consistency and fill it with surprises. If you can, make it a game. My wonderful wife was asked to do conditioning with level 10s, and she snuck over and she said, sure, I'll do it. And she snuck over. She goes, well, we could do conditioning, or would you like to play some games? And they were in heaven. Games! They crawled out of the gym covered with sweat, and their last comments walking out the door was, can we play games again? because they didn't know they were conditioning. Make it a game. And I keep on hearing this word from all of you, and I love this word. It's called control. When my daughter's afraid of the dark, I just turn the light on. So all we have to do is teach our athletes how to turn the light on, whether it's knowledge, whether it's going back 5 steps, any way you can to give them back control of their own experience. That's it.
Thank you so much. Dr. Goldberg, would you please go next?
A couple of things. You, as a coach, you don't ever want to underestimate the unbelievable power you have with kids, what you say, what you don't say, the looks you give them, and your most powerful motivational tool, confidence building tool with these kids. Tools to help them get over blocks is how you treat them and the relationship you build and that safe container that I've mentioned. You do that, you help kids feel safe, and they'll break down walls for you. The relationship is important, and you need to remember you're working with living, breathing, feeling organisms, not just athletes. Very, very important.
Thank you so much. Doc Alley, please take us home.
Well, I was actually going to say the same thing. Coaches, you are so powerful in the lives of your athletes. And so I want you to keep remembering the root word of the word inspire is to breathe. And so breathing in your own inspiration of who you want to be as a coach every day, and then inspiring your athletes by breathing their greatness and their belief into them. So keep breathing and keep inspiring.
Thank you so much. And I can personally say you four have really, truly inspired me. So thank you again for appearing on this panel. So on behalf of myself, John Min, the USECA video chairman, and Pat Goldsmith, my co-host, I wish to thank everyone for attending Coaches on Couches, episode 14 on July 17, 8 p.m. This was episode 14, The Mind, Fear, and Motivation, with Dr. Ali Arnold, Dr. Alan Goldberg, Ken Miller, and Lisa Mitzel. Please seek them all out. They are available through online consultations, emails, phone numbers. They have wonderful services, wonderful books, wonderful things, because I'll be honest, if you have the right mental attitude and the positive attitude, coaching truly is pleasurable. It's not a chore. It's fun. At MAGMA, we've created this kind of unique culture that I base on your teachings and your philosophies. And people who come to my gym go, John, your kids are never crying. They're always having fun. They're always motivated. And they do really well. What's your secret? And there really isn't any, you know? You just have to, like you said, treat them like living, intelligent, beautiful organisms. You know, they're not just athletes. And gymnastics truly is a beautiful sport. And I feel very blessed. And I always thank the parents. I say, thank you for letting me be part of your daughter's life. You know, I don't like the coaches who go, where's my paycheck? You know, and that's kind of their attitude. So once again, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Everyone have a good night.
Guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Good
you
night.
guys.
You're awesome.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
You guys.
Bye.
Everybody.
All right. Signing off. Take care, Pat. Thanks again for a wonderful episode.
Yes, thanks, John. Thank you, everyone.
I sent you a couple
I got him. Thank you so much. Ken, I want to speak to you more. I would love to have you and Bertina come to one of the gyms. All right?
Yeah, we would love to. Yeah.
All right.
It's going to cost you coffee.
At least. Good night.
Good night.
Next week, we have another wonderful panel. Coaches on Couches 15, July 24th, will be Excel Excellence. Everything and what you want to know about Excel gymnastics. We have Jane Caruso, the Region 7 chair, Dallas Gust, an Excel coach from Texas, Jen Skorsky, a New Jersey Excel coach and the Excel chairman for New Jersey, and Elaine Wolf, the Region 8 chairman for Excel. Once again, thank you so much for joining us on Coaches on Couches, a wonderful episode weekly that introduces topics on everything about gymnastics. My name is John Min, and my co-host is Pat Goldsmith. On behalf of myself and my co-host, we thank all the panelists and everyone in the audience who has joined us. Thank you again, and have a wonderful week.